What's going on, guys? Today I wanted to bring you another combo video for Xyz Infernity for the 2014 NAWCQ H.A.T format. The last time I made a video like this, it was really popular and a lot of people really enjoyed it, and in that video it was kind of just shuffling the deck, taking a hand, and talking about how I would go about playing it, and kind of a coaching session. This video is going to be slightly different. In this video, I want to look at different 2-card combinations and just how far you can take Infernity with just 2 cards. Now, if you haven't checked out my deck profile on Xyz Infernity for H.A.T format, I highly suggest you checking that out, and same with my previous combo and coaching video. If I remember, I should have both of those linked in the description of this video, so pause this video, check those out if you haven't already, and anyways, let's get started on this video. So just to show you guys some of the 2-card combinations that I'll be talking about in this video, the first one is Armageddon Knight plus Infernity Archfiend. The second is Tin Goldfish plus Infernity Archfiend. After that, we have Stygian Street Patrol plus Dark Graffer. I'll put that over here. Sorry, there's a bit of glare over there. After that, I'll just actually move these out of the way. Summoner Monk plus MST. And lastly, another common combination is Stygian Street Patrol plus your choice of extender that isn't a normal summon. So for example, Instant Fusion, Dinotherium, or Photon Thrasher. Now what I'll say is a lot of these combos are very similar to one another, specifically these 3 here, Dark Greffer and Street Patrol, the Archfiend and Armageddon Knight, and the Tin Goldfish and Archfiend. So I probably won't go over all of them, and I'll just kind of quickly explain why they're so similar. The reason these are similar is because, for example, with Dark Greffer, what you're normally going to do is discard the Street Patrol, send Archfiend Hyris, and add Archfiend, and then banish this to summon it. Whereas this is basically just summoning Tin Goldfish, special summoning the Archfiend, so it just skips the Street Patrol set. And same with the Armageddon Knight. Usually you're just sending the missing piece, which in this case would be Street Patrol, banishing it, and summoning Archfiend. So all of these are very, very similar. One other thing to note is you can also sub the warriors out for Rhoda. For example, if you see Stygian plus Rhoda or Archfiend plus Rhoda, it's basically the same exact thing. So just keep that in mind. So first off, I guess I will start with the Dark Greffer plus Street Patrol. This combo is kind of interesting. There's a lot of different routes. So again, you guys can play around with it too, but let's say you have these 2. For these combos, I also want to point out somehow, you have no other cards in hand, no cards in graveyard. Your opponent is basically non-existent, no hand traps, nothing, but you just have these 2 cards. So what can you do with it? So starting out, as I mentioned, normal summon the Dark Greffer and use its effect to discard the Street Patrol, which will allow you to send a dark monster from deck to grave. So here, I would send the Archfiend Hyris, which when sent to graveyard by a card effect, is going to allow you to add a Archfiend card. So here, we will add Infernity Archfiend to hand. Next, we can banish our copy of Stygian Street Patrol to special summon said Archfiend, and Archfiend's effect will trigger, because we have no other cards in hand, to add an Infernity card. Here you have a couple options with what you can add. You could add Launcher, you could add Break, you could add Barrier, or if you want, you can add another copy of Archfiend. Again, it doesn't really matter which one you add, just really depends on how far you want to take the combo. So Break doesn't seem like a good option here, simply because you have no other Infernity in grave at the moment, and it seems a little pointless. We could probably search it later on. We could go for Launcher, or we could, if we want to end on very minimum, again, Barrier, so you minimally have a negate. But here, I think the best option would either be to add Launcher or Archfiend. Let's go the Archfiend route first and see where it takes us, and then we can swing back around, go for Launcher, and see if it's any different. So here, what you can do is overlay the Archfiend and the Graffer for a copy of Lavavel Chain. From here, detach the Archfiend for Lavavel Chain's effect. I'll put that down there. Sorry again about the glare, I'm working on that a bit. Keep in mind we still have Archfiend in hand, so here we're going to send another copy of Stygian Street Patrol. We can then banish the second Street Patrol to summon the Archfiend again. And here, when we use the effect, we could go for something like, again, your Launcher, your Barrier, or in this case your Break, because you do have an Infernity engrave. Since we have the other Archfiend, what we can do is actually go for the Launcher, activate Launcher, send it, and just summon the one Archfiend back. In this case, you could use the Archfiend, and now you have a few more options you can actually go for here. You could go for Barrier, Break, Necromancer, or if you really want, the third copy of Archfiend. Here, because we do have 2 4s still, what we can do is take the Necromancer, and we will overlay into our second copy of Lavavel Chain. From here, we again detach an Archfiend, and we're gonna go and send our third copy of Stygian Street Patrol to graveyard. From here, we can banish the Stygian and special summon the Necromancer. We still have no cards in hand, so we can use the effect and summon the Archfiend. I'll put it over there. And we summoned Archfiend, so we are going to be able to get a search. And at this point in the combo, you can search for your Break or Barrier, whichever you prefer. If you go for a Break, you now have an Omni Negate because your Archfiend is in attack position. Or if you go for Break, you have a pop on your opponent's turn because you do have the Launcher in graveyard. Now, the one thing with this combo is you did go through all your Street Patrols. You still have one Archfiend in deck, but you're in, an okay position. Your opponent has to clear the board, and off of just 2 cards, you really can't complain about a board like this. Now, let's go and cycle back to the beginning of what I mentioned, where the hand is still this, and we sent the Stygian to grave, and then sent the Hyris, and added Archfiend. So, in that example, when we had banished the Street Patrol to summon the Archfiend, we had gone and searched another Archfiend. So, what if we don't want to search the Archfiend, and instead go for, say, Launcher? What we're able to do here is overlay these 2 into the chain, use the chain, and this time we can go and send a Necromancer to grave. In this case, we would then activate Launcher, send it to graveyard, and summon both of these back, in which case you can use the Archfiend effect and get your choice of other card. If you want, you could add another Necromancer, because in this case, there's no other cards in hand, nothing else in grave, so it could be follow-up if need be. Or you can search your Break or Barrier, again having an Omni Negate because you have an attack position Infernity, as well as having, the option of Break to pop a card. So basically, if you look at this versus the other combo I just did, you basically got to the same end board almost. The only difference is you didn't use all your Street Patrols, so you still have multiple in deck. You didn't go through all your Archfiends, so multiple still left in deck. But you still have -1 Xyz, because the other board had 2 Lavavel Chains. You kind of get to that same place by playing a little less. So, if your opponent maxed you, for example, you would be able to end on the same board you would have with less comboing and stuff like that. Now, obviously, the other play is better if you're trying to make a push on your opponent and do some damage, but that's just a good example. There are a lot of other combinations you could go for with just the Patrol and Graffer. And again, Similar to what I said about the other combinations, for example, the Tin Goldfish and Armageddon Knight, the only difference is you would normal this, special this. This would send your Hyrus to add your Archfiend, and then these overlay into Lavalval Chain to send your Stygian, which you would then banish and summon Archfiend and go from there. So that's the first combination. Like I said, very, very common to see in this deck, and it ends on an okay board for just 2 cards. Not that many combinations in other decks can get there, minus, I guess, if you see like Lone Fire plus Soul Charge in Sylvan or something like that, which is extremely strong. So next, we can look at the Extender plus Street Patrol. These are probably going to be very similar to that other combo I just showed you. Depending on which extender you have will determine the order in which you do this. For example, if you see Thrasher and Stygian, you're going to want to special this first and then normal summon. Or if you see, one of these, you can summon this first. You would see if your opponent has Bottomless or something like that, and then you're able to use one of these and special summon for your other extender. So again, it doesn't really matter. Let's just use these two. So summon Thrasher, normal summon the Street Patrol. From here, it's kind of the same type of thing. You're overlaying here for Lavalval Chain. In this case, you already have the Street Patrol, so when you detach, you're going to send your copy of Archfiend Hyrus, adding your copy of Archfiend, in which case you could banish the Stygian, summon the Archfiend, and here for something, basic, I would probably just go for the Barrier because you have no other Infernities in graveyard to get advantage of using the break. The Launcher isn't going to be live right now. I guess if you want to think into the future, since again these are like kind of in a vacuum type plays, you could add the Launcher or the Necromancer as follow-up. The one thing to be worried about in this exact situation is if you add the Necromancer and draw into another monster that specifically needs a normal summon, you might struggle to get it out of hand. So if you don't go for the Barrier for the Omni Negate, again, this is a super, super simple play. It's nothing explosive, but it's just off of 2 cards. You could add the Launcher so when they clear your board or whatever, next turn, whether you draw a monster or not, you have this to summon back the Archfiend and be able to keep comboing and things. It's not the craziest board, like I said, but you're working with borderline no cards at all and still being able to potentially put up an Omni Negate, put up multiple monsters, and things of such sorts. Next, we'll look at the Summoner Monk and MST. It's very similar to the other ones. Like I said, it's not a whole lot of variation. It's more so how deep into the deck do you really want to dig with your plays. So for example, this one, you would normal summon. Its effect will switch it to defense position. You can use the effect and discard the MST. This could also be any spell. And here you have a few options of what you want to go for. You could go for Street Patrol and then overlay these into Lavalval Chain, sending your Archfiend Hyrus. You could go into Armageddon Knight and send your Street Patrol and then overlay these into Lavalval Chain, send the Hyrus, add the Archfiend, and you have this engraved to banish and keep comboing. Or if you want to just skip some of that, you can also just go for the Archfiend, and because you have no cards in hand, Archfiend's effect will trigger, and this kind of takes you back to that first combo I showed off, where you have the option of what you want to go for. You could go for, say, Launcher, you could go for Necromancer, or you could probably go for another Archfiend. In a case like this, sometimes going for the other Archfiend is really good if your opponent has DD Crow, and when you go to, Lavalval Chain detach, they might just preemptive drop a Crow or something, so having multiple Archfiends is very important. So again, just depending on which one you go for will change a lot, but in this certain case, if you were to go for the Launcher, you could overlay these into Lavalval Chain, you could detach, and here you have kind of the same situation. You could send another Archfiend, you could send a Necromancer. What you could do, which is cool, is since you added Launcher before, is get the other Archfiend in grave, then use the launcher, summoning both of these back. Both will attempt to activate, but the thing is after you've resolved one, the other one won't be able to because you have a card in hand. So from this point, you could add the Necromancer if you wanted, and then overlay these into your Lavalval Chain, detach, send another copy of Street Patrol, banish it to summon the Necromancer. Necromancer effect, summon back Archfiend, and it's very similar, like I said, to that first combo, where from here you could get your barrier, or in this case, you know, you do have your launcher in grave, so if you wanted to go for break, the break is live as well, or similar in a complete vacuum, you could go for another copy of your Necromancer just as follow-up, since you'll have no cards in hand, but you do run into that situation where if you draw a monster, you might not be able to discard it. Now, obviously, if you then get into, say, another copy of Graffer or something as your draw for turn, that will completely change. Obviously, we only play one Archfiend Hyris in the deck, which is kind of bad if you draw it, but there are ways around it with larger hands, so that's something to keep in mind. But I just thought I'd show you that even on the bare minimum cards, you can do some cool plays. There was the point in the combo where you did have, you know, two Archfiends. I believe it was something like this. So in theory, when you add off of this, if you were to go for the break, you can also then overlay these for any other Xyz you want. You could go for something like Key Beetle to protect the break. You could go for Dweller if your opponent's on hands, or Mermails or Dragon Rulers or anything that can get hit with that. You could, you know, even go for something like Rhapsody, banish some of your opponent's cards and then equip it to Lavalval Chain, so then you have Lavalval Chain follow-up. There's even the point where if you go for this, you could go for Lavalval Chain. So you would go for the second copy of Lavalval Chain here, and what you're able to do is use the effect to stack your deck. So you could go and stack your other Archfiend, so when you draw for turn, you can then special summon this and be able to search anything at this point. You know, your grave's full. There's a lot of different combinations and stuff, or you could just search at that point your Necromancer, summon it, summon back an Archfiend, and keep comboing from there. There's just so many different combinations that it's kind of hard to put it in a vacuum like this, but I figured you guys might enjoy some actual two-card combos, given the last time it was more so just your opening hand type of combo. Let me know what you guys think. If you enjoyed this type of video, I would love to hear your guys' opinion. Maybe you guys tested it out and got to other end boards, because there is other ways to do this. I'm kind of just coming up with this on the fly, but let me know in the comments section, or if you want to see more videos like this with other decks, gameplay, or any other type of video, let me know, and make sure you're dropping likes, sharing with your friends, and anyways, I will see you in the next video.